Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of McFly's Movie House. I'm your host, Marta McFly, and today's episode is a lot different than what we've done so far. As you all know, I'm usually here chatting about fiction for the most part, but for today, I decided to do this episode because it's on a topic that when I found out about it, it just truly rocked me to my core. It explored a subject that I was aware of for sure, but when it comes to the severity of the implications, I just never really considered it. And once it was put on my radar, I just wanted to let everybody know and raise awareness about it because I think it's so important and timely that we see some change today. So let me just explain this a bit further. Imagine you have a regular day, you're going about your business. By and large, you have a good life, and you log on to social media and you see that someone sends you a link to a pornographic website telling you to look at it. And initially, of course, probably think that this person got hacked. So you ignore it. But after some pushing, lo and behold, it's real. And you see your face, deepfaked, engaging in sexual acts that you never consent to having been placed online. And then you look into it a bit further and you see that there's multiple videos, and these videos have racked up thousands upon thousands of views. So what do you do? That's exactly what happened to the subject of the documentary we'll be talking about today. And not just her, but countless other women online. The documentary in question is called Another Body. It is co-directed by Reuben Hamlyn and Sophie Compton, and it won the South by Southwest Jury Award, along with many other awards, and it was picked up by Utopia for distribution in the US, and it's been generating so much buzz online. So I'm grateful to be joined by Reuben today and can't wait to talk more about this. So hello, Reuben. Congratulations, and how are you?
Hi, thank you so much. I'm well. I mean, I first want to say that was an incredible introduction. I wish you were pitching our movie instead of us. Yeah, I'm great. I'm so glad to be here. I'm so happy to talk about this film and this really urgent topic because although the sort of more attention has grown in the last 6 months, it's still neglected. People don't understand
Mhm.
quite how pervasive this issue is and quite the extent of the traumatic effects that can arise out of being targeted by this form of technologically assisted abuse.
Absolutely. And that was one thing that I noticed too, is I mean, this came out last year and what change has happened in on a grand scale. So it's great to be talking to you about this today. And I know, like I said, I reviewed your movie on my socials months ago and I just couldn't shake it out of my mind. It's horrible. And I watched it again to prepare for today's episode. And I thought, watching it the second time around, I wouldn't get that feeling in my stomach, the pit of my stomach, when we learned what's happened to our lead, Taylor. And yet, as soon as it happens again, even upon rewatch, I felt disgusted. And from my research, I found out that you were doing research on 4chan, where you essentially infiltrated these groups. And there were groups that even commissioned others, from what I'm understanding, to make deep fakes. So, my question is, what's the most jarring thing that you discovered in your research?
I mean, there was a lot. There was a lot, a long period of very mind-warping research, and there are a lot of jarring discoveries along the way. I think a lot of it was actually to do with the tastes of this community. I think they evidenced a profound misogyny. A lot of the deepfake creators are targeting, women in their lives, but when it came to women in the public eye, the women that were so often targeted were women that were sort of spoke out for feminist causes, and it felt like a culture of punishment for women who are willing to use their voices to try and change the sort of the gendered landscape of the society that we live in, and seeing just how like deep set and the strength of that hatred was terrifying.
Yeah, truly. Yeah, I mean that's what I noticed as well from your doc, is just how strong this is, and you're right, it is terrifying. And I want to stress that again for those listening, because I think it's so important to visualize how many people this is happening to. I think in your doc you say that there are around 9,500 sites that specialize in non-consensual deepfake imagery. That's just last year. So who's to say there aren't more now, right? And then worse is that the deepfakes don't fall under the parameters of non-consensual pornography laws because it's not your body. So I just want to throw out some figures before I get to my next question that I got from your website. Researchers predict that there will be over 5.2 million deepfakes in 2024, so this year. 90% is non-consensual porn of women. And in the US, 1 in 12 adults reported that they have been victims of image-based abuse. So that's just America. You also list that in the UK and Australia, it's 1 in 3 people. So to go back to your doc, when Taylor calls the police and tells them what's going on, it's just infuriating that these law enforcement officials could not grasp what the problem is, which is baffling to me. How is that possible? And maybe you can explain it better, but how is it possible for these websites to be able to put not just the deepfakes, but your full name, your address, where you go to school or work? Couldn't these victims reach out to these sites directly and ask for this to be taken down?
So yeah, I mean, first I'll start with just a couple of corrections there. One, the
Mm-hmm.
9,500 sites is sites dedicated to intimate, all forms of non-consensual intimate imagery, not just
Mm.
deepfakes. And also that figure at the end of the documentary was based on a study in 2017, and new studies coming out soon, and the number is a little bit lower, but it's still shocking. And the really important thing is the sort of the rate of growth of deepfake videos being uploaded online, and this year, more deepfake videos will be uploaded than all prior years combined. So since 2017, since the creation of the technology, so it's really exploding right now. And that's the sad truth of it, is that, yes, these sites do host this type of content, and there are no laws which force them to act upon and try and sort of take down content, which deepfake abusive content. Sites like Facebook and Twitter, if you reach out to them, they're likely to sort of take down the videos that have appeared. And that's not always the case, but they should do. And in the case of sort of more mainstream porn sites like Pornhub, again, you can get in contact with them. They're likely to sort of take the videos down. But the reality of the internet is once a video sort of appears, it's kind of impossible to get rid of it. Not just can the original creator re-upload it another website, anyone who's seen that video and downloaded that video can then re-upload it. So the responsibility of monitoring for the re-emergence of images and videos often falls onto the victim, and that really protracts the traumatic effects of this form of abuse, because there's always the fear that the video is going to sort of re-emerge. You have to sort of be constantly alert and looking for it to make sure you can sort of take it down in the future. And these takedown processes can be as simple as sending an email, but they can be more complicated, and it can involve a lot of bureaucracy on the part of the victim to ensure that these videos and images are being sort of seen and shared by more and more people.
Yeah, I mean, how do you control it? Like you said, if you have multiple people re-uploading, it's just it gets to a point of it being impossible. And before you started doing research for this, did it enter your mind that deepfakes could be used this way? Are there other severe implications that you can see it being used for in the future?
For sure. I mean, a lot of people don't know about deepfake technology, that it was made for this specific purpose. It was made to insert women into non-consensual imagery,
Oh,
into pornography. The first deepfake that was created was a video of Gal Gadot in a pornographic video, and it appeared in 2017 on Reddit. And so this technology was birthed into the hands of a community that was set on using it to harm women. Obviously, it's now been adopted by other communities, and then there's like deepfake satire videos on YouTube, and that's fine. I personally believe it's labeled as a deepfake. It's clearly satire. I'm all for the use of deepfake in that context. However, the technology is so powerful, very easy to be used easy and cheap to use, and so it is falling into the hands of all forms of bad actors. People are using the technology to scam, where deepfake audio technologies, but also deepfake face technologies, where videos are sort of being created of people's loved ones, where they're saying, "Oh, I've been in a car accident and I need
yes.
you to send me money," which is sort of a terrifying implication of the technology. And of course, there's a sort of its potential use in the political sphere, where deepfake videos of sort of politicians can be used and shared to try and influence elections. There have been a few cases of this. I think there was a huge hysteria around this when the deepfake technology first emerged. And I don't think, as of yet, those fears have really come to full fruition, although there have been instances of deepfake videos being used in political contexts. But so far, I mean, I guess to my knowledge, in the United States at least, the most influential sort of deepfake video was not actually a deepfake at all. It was a video of Nancy Pelosi slowed down to 70 or maybe 90%, which made her appear to sound drunk. And
Wow.
that is using technology which has been around for a very, very long time. I mean, anyone can slow down a video slightly and make someone slur their words. And so, although there is, the potential for it, it still hasn't really taken hold yet. Of
Mm-hmm.
deepfakes used to undermine elections.
Mm-hmm. Yet. You explain as well the process of how these deepfakes are made in the film, but how long does it take to make one? Because I remember in the doc, we discover someone says it's something like 150 images of someone that you have to pull, and that's all you need. But how does that translate into putting those images through a program?
I mean, there's no one answer to this. I mean, sort of depends on the quality of the deepfake. A better deepfake will take longer. It will also need more images, and those images will need actual some like manual labor for sort of selection and cleaning up of the sort of the data set, which will be ultimately used to make the deepfake. And then the deepfake itself will take longer for the computer processing to complete. But right now, you can download an application on your phone and using just one image, create a deepfake in 30 seconds of someone. Those deepfakes don't look as realistic. They can be sort of
Yeah.
identified deepfake pretty easily, especially if the video is in high definition. But if you compress that video to like, a low resolution, it's suddenly much harder to sort of tell that it's fake. And so you can make a fairly realistic low resolution deepfake now in an instant with very little like data. Yeah.
That's shocking. I'm so happy that you shared that because I never even would have considered that it's that easy. Yeah, that's terrifying. I know you've told this story before in other interviews, but I just want to make it visible to my listeners as well. From what I know, the journey that you took on 4chan led you to Taylor and to so many other stories. But I'm curious how the process was of facilitating that sort of trust with her and getting her to work with you.
Yeah, I mean, it was such a peculiar one because we got in contact with her in May 2020 in the middle of the sort of pandemic. So it was all online, and so we didn't have that time in person, which you would normally have with a documentary subject, where you can sort of foster that trust. But Taylor's a sort of a digital native, as me and Sophie are sort of digital cuspids, I guess. And so we are very used to sort of forming relationships and developing relationships online. And I think that with Taylor, what really was the sort of foundation for that trust is the way that we approached her. Because when we reached out to her, we didn't know if she was aware of the videos. So the start of the email to her was just saying, we saw these while researching a documentary. We think you need to be aware of them. Then we said, here's a list of sort of legal and psychological support. And finally, very, very much in postscript, we said, if you'd ever consider sharing your story anonymously or just having a phone call, like let us know and we'll have a chat. And I think that putting that in postscript and not being so forceful in the way that we had sort of approached her was the first step towards a sort of a very like trusting and supportive relationship that we had going forward over the course of the documentary. And when we explained to her our sort of strategy for anonymizing her over the course of the film, I think that really emboldened her to share her story. And so it wasn't in the end a particularly hard sell. I think Taylor's a very generous, lovely person. And when she found herself in this situation, I think one of her first instincts is, what can I do to improve the conditions for the next young woman who finds herself in this situation? As a kid, she wanted to be president. She's always wanted to change the world for the better, and so I think sharing her story and advocating for better conditions online for women was a sort of silver lining that she could find in the terrible situation.
Of course. And that's what I like about your approach to the documentary as well is you don't just cover the process of how an individual legally deals with this, but also the mental health ramifications that it can have on someone. So what were the ways that you found to protect your own mental health, not just Taylor's? Because I'm sure you were just getting into the weeds with all that you were finding online. That must have been so draining.
It really was. And the sad truth is there's just not enough money in documentary to budget for psychological support for documentary filmmakers. Documentary filmmakers have to take on a huge amount of responsibility, not just in the sort of the labor involved in making the film, where you have to wear so many hats, but you have to take on responsibility for the well-being of your subjects, as well as the well-being of yourselves and your team when you're dealing with difficult material. I am so grateful I made this film with Sophie, my co-director, because I mean I had someone that I could speak to on the phone for sort of hours, and having her there as counsel, and I know she felt the same way. Having me as someone to speak to, I made the whole thing a lot easier. We could speak through our concerns and the hardships we felt like we were facing. But ultimately, to make this film, we did have to expose ourselves to some really horrific content in a way that for a while I do think it had very negative effects on me. And I found the research stage of this film very, very difficult. But seeing Taylor's journey and Taylor's growth and seeing the effects that this film has made it all worthwhile. And ultimately, the process feels cathartic when I look back on it now.
Mm-hmm. Of course, of course. Earlier in this year, it was also in the news that what happened to Taylor Swift. As we know,
Mm,
she had the deepfake pornographic images spread on Twitter, as you were mentioning Twitter
mm,
earlier. I think one video had something like 147 million views before it was taken down, or 47, sorry.
mm.
And there was also a video of her deepfaked and supporting Trump, again, as you were saying, tweaking things politically as well. That got 1 million views. And it's just crazy to me. Your doc came out in 2023, and yet with this Swift scandal, we're seeing these exact same situations going on in the following year. So, what change has been made at all? Do you think that something happening to somebody like Taylor Swift could be a catalyst for change because she's a enormous celebrity with a huge fan base?
Like certainly, I definitely think that for a week the whole world was talking about how deepfakes were used to abuse women, and that was a real like watershed moment I think for the activism. And it's horrible that a woman has to sort of be targeted on such a large scale for that to happen. But it does mean that people are paying more attention to the issue
Mhm.
now, and there's a lot more fire behind the sort of movement to change things. I mean, as of now, in the United States, there are a couple of states which have laws in place, but bills are being introduced which seem like they have potential to significantly change the way that this culture exists, the way that sort of law enforcement deals with instances of deepfake abuse. In the United Kingdom now, there's a criminal law, or actually in England and Wales, there's a criminal law, and slowly countries around the world are sort of trying to catch up with this technology. But ultimately, we don't, although criminal law is important for a very specific reason, we don't believe that's going to be that effective in stopping the sort of the worst perpetrators of this form of abuse, because these people know how to hide their tracks online. They know
Mm.
that if they use a sort of VPN, it's very, 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 very hard for them to be identified. And so very few of them will be sort of put in jail. And we don't really want to advocate for the incarceration of these young men. The sad reality is it's the people that aren't deeply involved in the deepfake community, they won't be the worst perpetrators, are going to be the people that will be identified by the police forces. And so for us, the sort of the real solution is putting pressure on the tech companies which have enabled this culture and industry of non-consensual deepfake abuse content to grow. And there are loads of players in that. The worst is Google. Google drives
Mm.
70% of the traffic to the mainstream deepfake porn website, directs users to non-consensual deepfake intimate imagery who aren't even searching for it. So if you search online for AOC's thoughts on deepfakes, the first search terms that come up, the first search results that come up are videos of AOC in non-consensual intimate imagery. And so Google has, there's precedent for Google to de-index or prioritize certain search terms, or for content warnings to sort of come up which try and dissuade you from participating in this, or sort of direct you to places to sort of seek mental health support. This will happen if you write at Google about sort of self-harming, or if you Google for CSAM, or child sexual
Mhm.
abuse material. These things will not appear on Google, but Google doesn't deem non-consensual intimate imagery or deepfake videos to be harmful enough to warrant them to be added to the list of websites which would be deprioritized on Google. We also have payment processors like Visa, MasterCard, and PayPal, which run payments on websites which are dedicated to this form of content. We have internet sort of domain, the sites that sort of host the domains of these websites like Cloudflare, which could refuse service to them and choose not to. Internet service providers like Verizon could easily be blocking these websites, but they're also choosing not to. And so what we really want to do is target these companies which are sort of upholding the infrastructure or the architecture of this online culture, and force them to do what they can to stymie the flow of people to this form of abusive material. And so, yeah, that's our goal. And the sad truth of it is that the only way to really pressure them is if there's a criminal law in place, a federal criminal law in place in the United States, because otherwise they're not going to do anything about it. If we go to them and say, you're directing people to this harmful content, they'll say, oh, well, harmful is an ambiguous term. There can be sort of other definitions of it. If we say to them, you're directing people to illegal content, that becomes unequivocal.
Hmm.
Much easier for us to sort of apply the pressure that we need to force them into action.
Of course, yeah. I mean, it's just crazy to me. We were given this tool, the internet, and it's done so much good in the world, yet given us so much information right at our fingertips, and yet at the same time, it's horrifying to see what it's produced as well. And maybe this is a bit of a strange question to ask, but are there any positives to deepfake technology that you'd want to share?
Well, I mean, we see deepfake technology as having revolutionary potential for documentary cinema and video journalism. I, I mean, I can say this now, and it's so spoken about, but the face that you see in another body is not the real Taylor's face. It's the face of a woman who sort of gave her face to Taylor to protect her, and we basically transplanted that face onto Taylor's using deepfake technology. And what's so special about it is that the emotion that you see conveyed on that face, like every time the face that you see smiles or like raises an eyebrow, that is the exact geometry of the smile or the eyebrow raise that was the original footage of Taylor, but just like mapped onto another face. And
Wow.
so you really do get a sense of the true emotion of the person, but with all the identifying facial features sort of swapped out. I mean, there's never been anything like this in documentary, and we really believe that this can enable so many vulnerable subjects or contributors to be able to share their story. It can give these people a voice who otherwise wouldn't have been able to in any video format. So we're really excited about what deepfake technology can do for documentary, and we hope that other documentary filmmakers adopt it to enable these people to
Mhm.
share their story.
I'm happy that you mentioned that. Actually, I wasn't sure if I can
Mm,
spoil the big reveal of the
mm,
movie, but just to, as a total aside, it blew my
yeah.
mind when I was watching it for the first time, and when the reveal happened, my jaw was just on the floor because it looks so real. It's remarkable. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. But on March 19th and 20th, you hosted your first global virtual summit on deepfake abuse. Can you talk about how that experience was?
That was fantastic. I mean, when we first started working in this field, the technology was so new, and so few people were concerned with deepfake technology. And over the last sort of 4 or 5 years, so many brilliant minds have started to try and tackle it. So being able to bring these people together and sort of help forge these relations and try and sort of find solutions with people from all over the globe who are doing such fantastic work was just an incredible experience. It was so great to hear what everyone is doing, because the field is now actually so big that we can't keep up with everything. So I learned so much over the course of those 2 days, and we had some really important sort of stakeholders and decision makers in attendance, and so they would have learned a lot as well. And I really think that summit has was a big step forward for the field of activism that we're working in, and we're so grateful for everyone that gave their time and insight to that summit.
What is the way the public could be better educated on the implications of AI and revenge porn besides
Mm,
watching your
mm.
documentary?
I mean, I think the is how tech companies have enabled this culture to grow, as I sort of articulated like earlier.
Hmm.
That is the kind of they're the invisible like hand in it. I don't think it doesn't seem sort of it's not totally intuitive when you sort of say, oh, Google's partially responsible for this. People don't really
Hmm.
understand why, and it needs that sort of further elaboration. But without sort of public pressure, Google aren't really going to do anything about it. And so, yeah, learning about how these companies are facilitating this abuse and getting behind sort of the cause for their behavior to change, I think will be the single most effective thing, and the most sort of important like item of like education, I think, around this form of abuse. But I think it's also incredibly important, that young men understand the potential harms of this abuse. I think I do really do sympathize with teenagers who don't fully comprehend, that on the other side of the screen you're ruining a life when you do a few clicks of a button on a computer screen. And so I hope that young men are watching this film. I hope that schools will be showing it to their student body. So men understand the sort of the real consequences and potential for harm of creating deepfake images and videos, because it can be sort of devastating. People have taken their own lives as a result of it, and I don't think that a lot of these men are thinking about it when they do create the videos. That being said, there is a sort of a sense of cognitive dissonance, which is held a little bit because they think it's a bit of a victimless crime. They argue, like, oh, I was just, this is just an image. It's not a real fake image. It's not a real image. Like, what does this really mean? But it's so often used in cases of revenge pornography. And what's,
Mm-hmm.
although we're trying to retire that term, what's implied in sort of revenge is an intent to harm. And men know that by sort of creating and sharing these videos, they can humiliate and shame and psychologically harm a woman. I think both of those perceptions can sort of be held despite being contradictory at one time in the mind of these creators. But yeah, we want to change the behavior of young men and change the behavior of tech platforms.
Absolutely. And if someone was to have this happen to them, what would be the steps to take or avenues to explore? Beside, like, should they do what Taylor did in the doc and go to law enforcement, or what would be the first?
It's true. We're actually creating with a victim's guide with Adam Dodge, who's the lawyer who appears in the film
Mm-hmm.
now, which will run you through sort of step by step for what to do if you or someone you know is a target of deepfake abuse. And that is very comprehensive, and hopefully it will sort of be published by the time this goes out, and you could like add a link to it in case there's anyone. That'd be
Yes.
fantastic. Going to law enforcement is sensible. You have to sort of go in with curbed expectations, because law enforcement are often don't really act upon it, and there is a sort of a culture of victim blaming or not taking the issue seriously enough, and so targets often find themselves sort of disappointed and kind of actually even traumatized by conversations with law enforcement. But at least it sort of creates a record of the abuse. There are a lot of people you can reach out to depending on where you are in the world who can assist you with legal and sort of psychological help in your case, and the victim's guide will sort of point you in the direction of some of the best people depending on where you are in the world. And Chain, which is a British organization, I think they are a British organization, has a really good guide available online for looking after your well-being after being after finding yourself a target of deepfake.
Incredible. I'll include that as well, along with your guide too,
Mm,
once this comes out.
mm.
If there was one thing you could change about the film industry as a whole, what would that be?
That's a lot.
Loaded question.
What would be the one thing that I would change? I mean, I would just grossly increase funding from government bodies. I think that, it's so hard now to make art for art's sake. And
Mhm.
I say this having made a film which has like a, social impact goals. But I think that right now the sort of trend in English language films is either to be for the purposes of entertainment with expectations of box office success. And a lot of the films otherwise that are sort of being funded, and these are really important films, I'm not knocking them at all, but are films which have social impact goals. And I think they're so important as a creator of a social impact movie. But I do feel like it's like a dying art in the English language. I mean, it's not the case in France at all. But to have films that are being made for kind of the sake of art, which are taking a gamble, are not necessarily and don't really need to get the sort of box office success because they've been funded by the government. So we can't let the fantastic sort of tradition of arty English language movies die. And so that's I really wish, I hope that particularly in the UK and English, the funding from the films has been really eviscerated over the last 20 years.
Mm.
I hope there's more money funding in England. I mean, the US, I hope there's an establishment of a government body to fund films, although I don't really see that happening. But yeah, that would be my hope. Yeah.
That would be my answer too. So we have that in
Mm,
common there.
yeah.
Lastly, for today, I'm curious what you're working on next. I know you have a short fiction film, Bitterweeds, in post production. Can you talk about that at all, or?
Yeah. So I actually just did the final sound mix last weekend. So
Mhm.
that's very exciting.
Oh,
Submitting to
congrats.
festivals now and hoping for a premiere this year. So yeah, I can't wait for that to go out. I My first love really actually was fiction film, although I have two loves in documentary as well. But I am hoping for my next feature to be a fiction film because I don't want to be pigeonholed as a documentary filmmaker. I want to throughout my career. The dream is to be able to do both, and I think it feels quite important to the second feature to be a fiction film if I'm sort of seeking that career. And so I have a first draft of feature script, which I won't talk too much about now, but I'm very
Okay.
excited about it and sort of sending it. We'll be sending it out to people hopefully by some point in the summer. Yeah, hopefully that people bite and that gets made in the not too far future. Yeah.
Cool. Well, fingers crossed over on my end. I'll be following
Mm.
along. Absolutely. Is there anything else that you want to shout out lastly where people can find your movie, your socials, anything at all?
Yeah, I would, we, alongside the film, we've run a kind of activism campaign, kind of an impact
Mhm.
campaign, but it predates the like release of the film, actually predates the production of the film, called My Image, My Choice. And so you can follow My Image, My Choice on Instagram or find our website, and there we have a whole list of sort of resources that will be uploaded there. You can share your story if you found yourself to be a sort of survivor of any form of intimate image abuse and feel like sharing your story. We have a page on a new platform called Story Circle, Story Place. They changed the name, Story Place, and we. So join us and sign our petitions and get behind the sort of the campaign. The film you can find on Instagram at anotherbody.film is the handle. We are available in lots of territories around the world, so depending on where you're listening to, you can sort of find out how to watch on through our Instagram and our website. And me personally, my Instagram handle, if you want to follow me, is URGHREUB, Rube. And so, yeah, follow me. If you have any questions, hit me up, a message or an email. I'll be happy to sort of answer anything. So, and thank you so much, Marta, for this opportunity. It's been great talking to you.
Of course. Thank you for coming on. I'm just as grateful and I'm just happy that we can spread awareness about this as much as we can. So, yeah, thanks again, Reuben.
All right, bye bye. Have a lovely weekend.
You too. Bye-bye.